Please take a moment to listen to this disclosure from the Common Ground podcast. The Common Ground podcast is dedicated to exploring commonality among individuals with diverse perspectives. Our guests may present unique worldviews related to health, psychology, and overall well-being. Please note that the Common Ground podcast does not directly promote or endorse any specific ideas, concepts, or actions discussed during our episodes. Listeners are encouraged to approach the information shared with discernment and to consult with their mental and/or physical health providers before making any changes to their health or wellness practices. The views expressed by guests and hosts are their own and do not directly reflect the opinions of the Common Ground podcast. Your well-being is important, and we advocate for informed decision-making. Thanks for listening.
One of the misconceptions about male grief is that males don't feel. We do feel. We just deal with it differently. In my generation, we were told, feelings make you more vulnerable, they make you weak, you got to suck it up and you got to take care of your family. And when that message became very evident to me was when I saw my wife in tears, I saw my kids, in distress. And it wasn't the tears that bothered me. It wasn't my kids' distress that bothered me. It was what it signified. It signified to me that I had, at that point, failed as my job as a protector of my family. She looked at me and she said, "Why don't you listen to music anymore?" So I'm thinking to myself, well, this can't be Patty, because Patty and I never listened to music before. But it turns out that my daughter had been coming through her to communicate to me. And that's how that whole weekend started. And I realized that the experience may not be believable for everybody. And I realized that, and I can accept that. But for me, the minute this was the entire weekend was like this, the minute Sydney and John that this happened, I knew it was real because I had asked for this. I said, I want something more. Not only did I get spiritual knowledge, I got a whole different perspective that allowed me to see life, death, and life after death.
Hearing other people's beliefs can help us to strengthen our own beliefs as well. I don't think that it's even just the ability to expand per se so much as to understand somebody that we desire to have as a relationship with, understand the lived experiences that have brought them to that conclusion. I struggle with the idea that truth is subjective to people's interpretation, and I think that that is what my beliefs and my belief system is founded on, is the idea that truth is in fact objective.
I want to be very careful with this because, listen, I am so glad that you were able to find peace and everything else, but at the same time I feel obligated to speak my truth, and because my truth would disagree with your truth of, I believe that we live in a spiritual realm. I believe that there are angels and there are demons, and they all have access to our lives and different things. For me, I would be cautious on who we allow to do stuff. Welcome to the Common Ground podcast, where stories connect, perspectives collide, and purpose is found in the middle.
Every week, we sit down with unique and inspiring guests that come from all walks of life, people who challenge the status quo, overcome the odds, and live with intentionality.
Whether you're driving to work, on your morning walk, or just looking for that spark to ignite your week, you're in the right place.
Welcome to the Common Ground podcast with your hosts, John Fletcher and Sydney Curtin.
Welcome, everybody, to the Common Ground podcast. Yes, it is your boy. It is John, as always. Excited for another episode here today. And as always, I can't do this without the lovely, the brilliant, the Miss Sydney Curtin. How you doing, Sydney?
Good. How are you, Fletcher?
It's been crazy. The weather, the snow, everything it makes life interesting, right?
Yeah, we were just talking about how over the cold we are. So, this is going to be a good one. Good conversation. Warm. I got my coffee. Excited.
Awesome. I don't know if I told you, but I got a new pen that can write underwater.
No way.
It can also write other words too, but
Missed the dad jokes.
And here's another thing that, my clothes have been a little tighter on me, so I thought the dryer was shrinking my clothes. But as it turns out, it was the refrigerator.
Oh, oh man.
As always, you can write in a comment which dad joke you preferred for the day. So let us know below and comment. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about this new episode. Um, yeah, today with us we have Dave Roberts. How you doing today?
I am doing very well, Jen. Thanks for asking.
For those of you who may not know who Dave Roberts is, he became a parent who experienced death of a child when his daughter Janine died of cancer on March 1st, 2003, at the age of 18, due to a rare and aggressive form of cancer. He is a retired addiction professional and an adjunct professor in the psychology child life department at, how do you say that? Utica?
Yes, yes.
Utica, Utica University in Utica, New York. Dave also teaches psychology classes at Pratt Munson School of Art and Design. He is the host of Teaching Journeys podcast, which can be found on most podcast platforms and YouTube. What episode number are you up to, Dave, on that?
209.
Woo, that man has been going. So we're getting there. We're in the 20s, but one day,
Just add one more zero.
one day we'll be in the 200s. Dave has presented grief workshops nationally and has been a keynote speaker as well. He has been a past HuffPost contributor and has contributed numerous articles to other online publications. Dave also co-authored a book with Reverend Patty Farino titled When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister, which was published on March 1st, 2021. Welcome to the Common Ground podcast, Dave.
It's good to have you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Sydney. I've been looking forward to our conversation for a while now, and I'm looking forward to the questions you're going to ask. And like I said, I'll tell your audience I'm an open book, so anything goes.
You know, I think when you have the lived life experience, not just head knowledge, because you have both the psychology background, but you've also lived and walked this journey of the application for the tools that psychology gives us to use navigating just life, right? Like life is hard and we all have stuff that we deal with, but you don't just have that knowledge as a teacher and a professor, but you have it because you've been through some pretty heavy things. And it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that really big milestone, which I can relate to this in a different capacity, but was losing your daughter.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Sydney, I had experienced other losses. I've danced with death since I've been 5 years old. First loss I had was my father leaving. Leaving my mother to raise me as an only child. She never got remarried again. And as we know, early experience matters as it manifests in relationships and in later life. I experienced other losses, my maternal grandmother, maternal aunt who helped raise me, and the list goes on from pets to the mentor who taught me everything I knew about addictions counseling, how to build teams, how to treat people. But the loss in the event that just really wreaked havoc with the world as I knew it, my values, my priorities, and my beliefs was the death of my daughter in 2003.
Mm. You know, and I say this often, but I think that there is a natural, very natural reason to that. The cycle of life, we've talked about this on our show before, is that we raise our children with this unspoken expectation that they're going to see us into old age and that we as children will grieve the loss of our parents, but we never anticipate, nor do we ever mentally prepare ourselves for the grief of and the gravity of losing a child. So I can't even fathom.
No, and Sydney, I hope, and John, I hope you never have to fathom that. I hope you never have to fathom that because, all the training in the world, all my education, all my background as a therapist didn't even remotely prepare me for the road that was ahead of me. I had to basically, at the age of 47, learn how to walk all over again.
Mm,
Life doesn't prepare you as a parent for bearing a child. It's unnatural. It goes against the natural order of the universe, which means, you get old, you die, and you will
right.
grieve and you will yearn but it's kind of an expected path of life. But
Correct.
and we
Right.
expect our kids are going to carry our legacy, but not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So give us the 30,000 foot view too, just so that we can back up a little bit. Who was Dave, and what were you doing prior to the loss of your child?
well, and so everybody asks me that question, Sydney and John. I tell them if you want to know who I was at 47 years old, you need a search party, a special ops team, and a whole bunch of other, a whole bunch of other operations to find it. But at 47, I think I was a typical 47-year-old. I had focused on, career goals, building a family, and I expected my life was, building a career, getting my education in later life, doing all the things that I think is the expected path for a 47-year-old to lay down their legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had this belief that, my life was going to go in pretty much linear fashion. My kids would get married. They present me with grandchildren, and we'd all live to be happy, healthy, and we'd all, grow old together. And my kids would live to bury me. But at the age of 47, that proved the linear path that I had scripted for myself. The universe had different plans. And at the age of 47, after 47, initially I became a person whose world suddenly became terrifying and uncertain after the death of my daughter. And my midlife crisis was trying to determine, who am I? What kind of a world am I going to live in? What's my world going to look like without the physical presence of my daughter? And do I even want to live in a world that doesn't have my daughter in it? Now, to make it clear, I was never suicidal. But if God came down and said, Dave, we're going to let you start eternity today, and it was a day after my daughter's death, I would have been happy to do so. So, and who I became after, as a result of the challenges that I experienced with her death, as a result of her death, with the support of some great parents who had lost a child along the way, and finally with meeting Reverend Patty Farino, who facilitated a powerful spiritual transformative experience. My perspective changed. I was able to re-engage in life again, realize that I could always keep the memory of my daughter alive and
Mm.
carry that with me to be of service to others and to re-engage in life, and accept that my life is going to be where it was going forward without the physical presence of my daughter. And
Right.
acceptance doesn't imply closure at all. It just,
Right. Right.
so,
It is interesting. People, they say that time heals wounds, and I I think that time just makes the wounds easier to manage, is really what it is. They also say things like that these events are transformative and can be extremely impactful. And I recognize that when people say those things, that it's not to negate the severity or to try to minimize the hurt that was attached to the event. However, it is one of those interesting things where it's like, can you be impactful and profound due to these lived experiences? Absolutely. Would I take having my daughter back personally over all of the things that people would say that I have quote unquote accomplished as a result of my lived experience? Any day of the week.
and I would echo that. If I could have experienced a transformative experience or any other life challenge other than my daughter, I would have taken it in a heartbeat. But
Absolutely.
but Sydney, John, we don't have any control over the challenges that are going to befall us in this lifetime, but it's how we respond to those challenges that are going to dictate the quality of the life that we lead.
Hmm.
And I know I eventually want to get into that spiritual transformation that you had. But one of the things that had dawned even as we talked um before this and planned out kind of what the topic was going to be and stuff. One of the things we didn't talk about, um, which dawned on me just, as you're talking, is that we're looking at it all from your perspective. But as you said, you were married. So how does the grieving, how does going through this personally differ from also having to go through this as a couple? Because, um, tragedy not only affected you, it affected your whole family, you and your wife. So, how did you deal with that aspect of it also?
Well, first of all, in the beginning of our grief, I don't think my wife and I had the energy to deal with our own grief, much less each other's. So there was probably some periods of isolation where we were just trying to figure things out on our own, and we would come together. Um, but one of the things that was key for us was understanding how we grieved. And the way my wife grieved was much, much more different than the way I grieved. My grief was more hands-on. If my feelings became kind of overwhelming, what I would do is distract myself from those feelings by engaging in solution-focused activities, work. My wife was very open with her feelings. Um, and I think once we understood that, we were able to hold space for each other's grief and support that. I felt my feelings, John and Sydney, just as intensely as she did. I just dealt with it differently. And I think one of the misconceptions about male grief is that males don't feel. We do feel. We just deal with it differently. In my generation, we were told, feelings are make you more vulnerable, they make you weak, you got to suck it up and you got to take care of your family. And when that message became very evident to me was when I saw my wife in tears, I saw my kids, in distress. And it wasn't the tears that bothered me. It wasn't my kids' distress that bothered me. It was what it signified. It signified to me that I had, at that point, failed as my job as a protector of my family. I had one job, and that was to protect my family from pain. And their tears had reminded me that I couldn't do that with my daughter, even though she had an incurable cancer um, that had a 5-year survival rate of 10 to 15%. I still felt that guilt over the fact that I couldn't fix it and I couldn't prevent it.
Yeah, I know as a man, as a protector, and our role is to protect and to keep, the people we count most close and the ones we love the most, we're supposed to protect them. And I can relate that, when that doesn't happen, it definitely takes a toll on men. But it's funny because you're the second person that's been married that's lost a child that we've had on our podcast, and it's kind of like the other person, it was the roles were reversed. So, one thing I want to say to our audience is that don't put yourself in a box that all men have to are
Yes.
going to feel like. If you're not feeling the way Dave is, like the other person, they were more like your wife, where they were outward. They were the ones being out, and the wife was the one who was closed in. And it is funny. One of the common denominators is that it seems like both people deal with grief differently, but the way they deal with it is all up in the air. It isn't sex driven. It isn't, where males are always going to go this way with grief and women are always going to go this way with grief. So don't if somebody's going through that, don't feel like if you're not grieving the way Dave is, then maybe something's wrong. No, like that's just your perspective. That's how you handled the grief. And I just want to let people know out there that it's all right if you handle it differently.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong way to grieve. It's basically the way we grieve is an authentic expression of who we are. And it's an authentic expression of how we love who we've lost. And I mean, grief and love go together. You know, you grieve deeply for the people that you've lost because you love deeply. And you're right. Um, Ken Doka, who's a thanatologist, he's up, I think, from the Poughkeepsie, New York area. He talked about male grief, and he talked about males who grieve instrumentally, which is a traditional kind of expectations we have for male grief. The suck it up, tough. You know, uh, you suppress your feelings because of vulnerability. The intuitive male, who acts more from a feelings perspective, and is more open with their feelings. So, um, Yeah, so basically, it's every situation is different, and But the key is that do we respect how each other grieve? Are we going to try to change that? No. Is that do we respect how each other's grieve? Can we hold space for it? Can we understand it? And can we support it?
And I just want to go back to one thing. The first part that I was saying was that about the whole protecting thing. Where do you end up today with that? Do you what has changed? And I don't need to go through the whole journey, but how have you dealt with that whole protecting thing? Have you come to a realization that you were protecting her, there was nothing you could do? Do you feel still are you still in that same place where you feel like you let her down? Um, where are you today in that stage of dealing with that?
I let go of that a long time ago. I realized that the guilt and shame that I experienced over not being able to protect her was part of the journey that I had to go through with grief, and that had to surface so I could make peace with that. Where I am today, I realize that given the circumstances that we were dealing with, we did the best job that we could. And the other thing, in looking at my own daughter's journey, I had tried to get her to go into like clinical trials. I tried to get her to take a look at different therapies, perhaps, but she didn't want to go anywhere that was going to take her away from her family. And the other part of the story, John and Sydney, is that she died 10 months after giving birth to her first child and her only child. And she didn't want to leave her family. She wanted to spend time with her significant other and her child. And I learned that there wasn't anything I could have done to change that outcome, because what she taught me is that no matter what the age, is that we're going to live life on our terms and we're going to die on our terms. And she taught me that.
Mhm.
And understanding that, and also understanding that she had a sense that her mortality was, she was going to be living a shorter life. And I found out that I think she might have had some premonitions that her life was going to be shorter. That allowed me to realize that, hey, I couldn't have changed the outcome anyway.
Mm.
But I was holding myself hostage because of the expectations that I placed upon myself as her father. But once I was able to kind of reframe that, look at it differently with the help of not a lot of different individuals, including Patty Farino, I was able to make peace with it and realize, hey, I did the best I could, given the hand of cards I was dealt.
And
And maybe,
before you ask a question, I just want to make
yeah,
one
no, go
comment.
ahead.
Sorry, because I had a similar story. My mom actually passed away from cancer 6 days after my first daughter was born. Um, and so literally, we had to. We're in the hospital, and I'm sitting there with my my dad and my brothers, and I'm like, we got to give mom permission to go. Like every part of her was failing. Like she's holding on. She was a fighter, and um, so we kind of told her that we were going to be okay, and we kind of let everybody come in and kind of say goodbye. And my wife, and my daughter were the last ones to say goodbye to her. And literally, she passed when we put my daughter up to give her a kiss on the cheek, and that's when my mom passed. I totally believe 100% that she held on to see her first grandchild.
Mm.
Nothing was going to keep her from seeing her first grandchild. So I just your story just resonated with me with the way it happened with me and my mom. So I just wanted to share that.
It is crazy what we will put our physical bodies through when we have hope of holding on to something. It's like it's just so powerful, and also so heartbreaking at the same time, like, to hear both of those stories because mine is obviously very different, but, Dave, you said that you were able to reframe it, and I think that kinda takes us into your experience with it was an a s what was her title? The gal that you met for this.
She is an interfaith minister, ordained interfaith minister through the New
Okay.
Seminary in New York.
Okay, sounds good. So tell us, just give us like the helicopter view. How did you meet her?
Yeah, I'll give you the helicopter version, because if I gave you the deluxe luxury airplane model, we'd be here probably under another
Well,
pot of
and
coffee.
we
So
wanna yeah, and we wanna hear it, we wanna get into it. I just wanna paint, like, how so this was after your daughter's passing, correct?
7 years after, that's correct, in
And
2010.
were you intentionally introduced to her, or was this a divine appointment that happened?
It was we believe, in Patty and I looking at it, it was divine intervention that occurred. Let's put it this way: if I was one of the organizers for a grief conference that we had in upstate New York, it was called it was basically about embracing creative approaches after loss. And I was one of the organizers for the conference. She wanted to register for the conference, and her computer screen went blank the minute she hit the submit button. So had her computer screen not gone blank, we would have never met. So she had to,
Wow.
yeah, that's what happened. And she called me because my number was listed as a contact person. I registered her over the phone. We shared stories. She was at that time volunteer minister for the Angel of Hope, which is a statue that was erected in Rockefeller Park in Long Island, which is dedicated to children who have lost, or parents who have lost a child. And parents come together to remember, to connect with each other. And Patty was the volunteer coordinator for that. So we talked, shared stories about our experiences. I shared in a 45-minute conversation about Janine. She shared about two young men who had touched her life. She was never a parent that lost a child, but two young men that touched her life that really impacted her work with bereaved parents.
Mm.
We we said, if we see each other at the conference, I'll give you a big hug. She gave me a hug. I saw her at the conference, gave me a hug, and she said, I think your daughter sent me a rainbow. Now, I've got to qualify this. One of the things that Patty had asked me during the conversation is, do you believe in science? I said, Patty, I really don't believe in science all that much. I mean, I'm a science-based guy. I'm psychology. I believe in the here and now, a very Isaac Newton approach to the world. You see, feel, and hear it, or experience it. So but I said, I think my daughter sent me a double rainbow on Father's Day in 2009. So when she said, I think your daughter sent me a rainbow, that was the first point of serendipity. Um, Day after the conference, I was taking 3 presenters to Old Forge in the Adirondacks, so they could see the changeful leaves. They were having an intense spiritual conversation. And I think my soul ended up saying this before my mind and brain caught up with it. I looked up at the sky and said, I want to be where they are. Meaning I wanted to have an increased knowledge of spirituality to take the next step in my journey. And Patty had said, look, if you ever get to Long Island, come find me. You can stay with me and my husband. I'll show you my Long Island. So sure enough, there was a conference in Long Island that I wanted to go to with a colleague that Patty and I both knew at the time. I said, yeah, I want to go to this. So I called Patty, and she goes, yeah, come on up, stay with me and my husband. I asked her about 300 times if her husband was going to be okay with her bringing a strange guy into the house. And she said, yeah, no problem. And now to this day, 15 years later, we're all friends. But what happened is that after the conference, we came home. It was 9:30. This was November 11th, 2020. And 1111 is kind of the universal symbol of spiritual awakening.
Hmm.
And she invited me into her sacred space, which with all of her books and her where she meditated. And it was 9:30 at night, and she looked at me, and she assumed this cross-legged pose, very much like my daughter would have. Okay, very like a young adult would have. She looked at me and she said, "Why don't you listen to music anymore?" So I'm thinking to myself, well, this can't be Patty, because Patty and I never listened to music before. But it turns out that my daughter had been coming through her to communicate to me. And that's how that whole weekend started. And I realized that the experience may not be believable for everybody. And I realize that, and I can accept that. But for me, the minute and this was the entire weekend was like this, the minute Sydney and John that this happened, I knew it was real because I had asked for this. I said, I want something more. Not only did I get spiritual knowledge, I got a whole different perspective that allowed me to see life, death, and life after death differently. That led to marathon conversations about psychology and spirituality in terms of how the two could merge to help us find meaning after loss and the importance of critical thinking. And, that was all three of those parts were the basis for the book that John had mentioned in the bio that we had co-authored in 2021. And that has led me on a path of exploration, curiosity, and continued growth and development. And I knew it to be real because she was communicating things to me that she could not have known in a 45-minute conversation. The message that I got, and to sum this all up, is that the message I got was that, Dad, you're doing a great job honoring me, but there's other categories in your life that you have to honor. You're a father. You're a grandfather. You got my two brothers. You got your wife. You got your students. I'm always going to be with you. There's always going to be a part of me that's going to be with you, but you have to honor the other categories of your life as well. And so those were the messages that I got. And what we put in the book isn't even probably, it tells a little, we kept some stuff out, I think, for privacy reasons. But Patty and I put together a 14-page journal on that entire weekend, which I still have. So that is the very kind of condensed version of what had happened. But again, it all started with the computer failure that led us to the relationship that we have today and the experience that happened in 2010.
Sometimes the most impactful relationships come from the most, just seemingly insignificant interactions like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it has changed my life in ways that I hadn't even anticipated. With the work that I did with Patty, allowed me to find peace and do some ancestral healing with the father who left me when I was 5 years old, and my anger at my mother for overprotecting the heck out of me after he left. Because of the work that I did with Patty and what I learned through my conversations with her, and how that helped me deal with the challenges with Janine's death, that contributed or had a trickle down effect to healing in other areas of my life. So you want to talk about a complete perspective shift and also some ancestral healing as well. All of that happened as a result of meeting Patty and the subsequent conversations that we had.
Sure.
Was this your first introduction or experience with faith or a minister of faith, or were you involved in faith before this and this was just a different experience?
Well, John, I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic schools till I was 17. I was an altar boy, did the altar boy routine. I went to school every day, church every day as part of my training. And then when I was 16 years old, or 16, 17, I just stopped going to church because I could make a choice. And then, I just, I always believed in God, but I just didn't believe in the dogmatic approach to it. But so I've had experiences with faith before, but interestingly that you asked that question. First bereaved parents group I ever went to was a local support group here in the Utica, New York area, sponsored by a local funeral home. And the facilitator was a Jesuit nun who basically was very open to everything. If you were angry at God, she held space for that. And there was times that I was angry at God. I was angry at God for shattering what I perceived was shattering the life that was so predictable and safe, taking my daughter away from me. And it got to the point where I was so angry, I walked away from my existence as a bereaved parent. I stopped going to support groups. I stopped. It was about 2 years into it. I stopped going to support groups. I just said, I want my life to be the way it was before. I'm sick of this crap. I don't want to be a bereaved parent anymore. And turns out I became more miserable because when I shut down my grief, John and Sydney, I shut down my love for my daughter. And then when I realized that, I went and talked to Sister Rose. That's what was her name. And I told her, Sister Rose, I'm angry at God because he took my daughter away from me. And she said something that to this day remains one of the most profound things. And this was before the spiritually transformative experience. She goes, what was if God was just as angry as you were? Or, and I looked at that, or was just as upset as you were, not angry, but just as upset as you were. And I looked at that and I said, and at the time I had been experiencing things that I couldn't wrap my head around. I would listen to a song I would think about my daughter, a song on the radio would come on. I was walking my granddaughter around the block and a butterfly would follow me. And a butterfly is one of the eternal symbols of signs of our loved ones. But I had trouble. I was looking at it and said, yeah, this is different. I think there may be something going on, but I couldn't wrap my head around it totally and integrate it with my belief system. So I looked at it and said, well, maybe if God is just as upset as me, maybe he's trying to tell me something. Maybe he's trying to tell me through these events that I couldn't wrap my head around, that maybe that he's got my daughter's back and that she's well protected and that he gave me that opportunity to know that. But again, I still couldn't wrap my head around the survival of consciousness or how to integrate the concept of signs or after death communication into my belief system. But so yeah, that was my first encounter with faith, and Patty was my first encounter with interfaith.
Hmm. It's interesting because it seems like, and I'm curious how you respond to this, because you have the psychology background, you have the I'm going to say religious background, and I say religious rather than faith because religion, I'm going to define that as an act of works. It's not relationally based. It's what you do or the performance you put on to earn the stamp or the gold star that checks it off of your to-do list. And then this spiritual perspective that expands past the realm of religion from a Christianity perspective. All of those things don't naturally coincide together. So for people that say the interaction that you had with Patty in the space that she invited you to, I think that my first question is, did you test that interaction? Or did you feel the need to? Or did you just know from the get-go that you were talking to your daughter through Patty?
I knew from the get-go. I didn't question it at all. And I could have, but I didn't question it at all because, again, it was something that I asked for in my after the day after the conference, and just looking at some of the things that happened. The physicality was was so much like my daughter, and there were times that I actually thought I was really just talking directly to my daughter most of the time, and it was like I would address Patty as Janine. Um, and there were several instances of that. So I knew what I was experiencing was real. And I think Sydney and John, it had to be that traumatic because, or else it wouldn't have gotten my attention.
Mm, yeah.
And my daughter was about as subtle as a trumpet solo.
Mm,
She would, she would just, make a grand entrance. And if you asked her something, she was very, very direct. And so in looking at all of that contextually, that's how Patty presented to me through my daughter.
mm.
And I, and
What
I, and I knew it was real.
Sure. No, I hear you. And so for our listeners, what does psychology say about spirituality? And I can speak to this a little bit too, but from what I'm getting to is how you created this umbrella that you've defined your belief system by, with the knowledge that you have and the lived life experience that you have as well.
Well, what psychology said about spirituality is that basically spirituality is a non-starter. That basically we measure the validity of behavior and our experiences through what we can observe with our senses, which is interesting because I'm going to give you a little backstory. William James was the founder of psychology, and he wrote a book uh, called The Varieties of Religious Experiences, which examined what he called then higher consciousness and spirituality. Um, William James was also the the head of the Boston chapter of the Society of Cyclical Research, which originated in London in 1884, which explored non-ordinary phenomena and psychic phenomena and mediums. And he, through repeated contact with one medium, one medium that he found to be credible, he said that her experiences was valid. So this started out where psychology and spirituality were going to be a natural marriage because of James's influences. That, I think, got away when the school of behaviorism kind of opposed psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis would explore spiritual aspects such as dreams. Behaviorism was all about objective behavior. And I think once those two schools occurred opposite of each other, the merge didn't occur. But for me, whenever I would talk to Patty and she would explain, or she would say, why don't you explore, I'm going to suggest that you explore this particular thing, where my scientific mind came into play with scientific curiosity. I said, okay, let me see how this can merge with my existing science-based beliefs. I would explore it. I would find, wait a minute, this does work. Okay. This does work. And I would call her back and say, yeah, I think I can see where the two can coexist. And since then, in my own research and a course that I teach, it has been proven in a lot of research that spirituality and importance placed on spirituality and religion can be protective against mental health, can correlate with specific changes in areas of the brain that are responsible for spiritual awareness. So there is some correlation and there is some scientific evidence that spirituality does play a role in that. Plus, all of the spiritual practices that I've explored, the research has indicated that it does improve physical and mental health care outcomes. So because of all of that research that I did with talking to Patty, and then on my own, I began to realize that we could have different schools of thought coexisting and synergizing in a way that creates a greater understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
So,
Good understanding.
for some of our listeners who might be listening to this, they might say, it sounds more like a psychic than, a minister. You're the one who experienced it. You're the one who went through it. What would you say to somebody who might suggest that, it was more of a psychic that you talked to than a minister? Would you have an opinion? Would you not?
I mean, I think people, John, are going to perceive anybody's experience the way they want to experience. They'll perceive their own experience the way they want to perceive it. But for me, and Patty would never wanted to be considered a psychic medium. She said what she did. How she interacts with the world and how she interacts with the spirit world is she does that to help people find peace. And she doesn't want to consider what she does as for entertainment value or entertainment. And there are some mediums that are incredible. There are some that, when you look at evidentiary mediums, these are individuals that will give you specific evidence that only you could know that indicates that what they're seeing is real. And though Patty wouldn't consider herself to be a medium, the evidence that she gave me, what she was telling me, was that she was on point. Because in a 45-minute conversation, she couldn't have known 3/4 of the stuff that came through that weekend. So I believe that. And here's the other thing. We can't consensually validate each other's experiences, spiritual experiences. Sydney and you could say, I saw a cardinal, and that reminded me of my mother, or reminded me of another deceased relative. My job isn't to say, well, I don't believe in that because it isn't science. My job is to find out what that meant to you. What were you thinking of? Were you thinking of your mom? How did that experience feel when you had it? Did you feel at peace? What did you learn about yourself, and what did you learn from that experience that you could take forward moving in your grief? So my job isn't to question the validity of it. My job is to question the meaning that it had for you.
Has your experience changed the way that you teach psychology?
Oh yeah, it basically the paradigm shift or the perspective shift informs everything that I do. Informs my teaching. Um, it informs the podcast guests that I've had on my program. But yeah, and I tell my students straight up, especially when I'm teaching death, dying, and bereavement or cure of the human spirit, they know my experiences. They know about my daughter. They know about my belief system. And what I tell them, it's, I'm not going to, don't confuse my passion for what I believe with saying this is how you have to believe. I am going to present a perspective for you for consideration. You're, and I would ask you to find your truth within that perspective. And if their truth is that they can't find any truth in it, I would respect that. And we could still be friends because too often it's like, it's like, I mean, this is what I believe, or because this is what you believe, it isn't what I believe, so I'm not going to talk to you, which to me is total crap. We can understand, well, how did you come to that belief system? What resources did you use? Because you know something, John and Sydney, if I can entertain a belief system that's different than mine, I may be able to take one or two things that are going to expand my belief system and help me look at things differently. So I think if we establish ourselves as witnesses to what we believe, rather than questioning the validity of it or dismissing it or debunking it because it doesn't align with what we believe, I think we'll be better off.
Hearing other people's beliefs can help us to strengthen our own beliefs as well. I don't think that it's even just the ability to expand per se so much as to understand somebody that we desire to have as a relationship with, understand the lived experiences that have brought them to that conclusion. I struggle with the idea that truth is um, subjective to people's interpretation, and I think that that is what my beliefs and my belief system is founded on, is the idea that truth is in fact objective. Now, there are different ways that people come to that objective truth, I think, and that is lived experiences, it's testimony, it's trauma, and a plethora of other things. I mean, even William James, though, like he really struggled with the fact that we just functioned as robots, speaking like the founder of American psychology in the late 1800s. Like what he wanted to know is the flow of consciousness, so much so that it drove him to a state of depression where he had contemplated taking his own life, because he was like, if we all are just trapped inside this box, then I don't want to be a robot. And it's interesting because he didn't theorize his beliefs and the principles of psychology that he founded out of comfort. He actually did it to survive. And what's interesting about that to me is that that was a real pain point in his life, was understanding that we have this conscious flow. And that was one of his low points. And we don't know, obviously, everything about his personal life that also may have driven him to that state of depression. But for me, it was losing my daughter in a different sense. And for you, it was losing your daughter in a lived sense, her presence here on earth. And it's just interesting to look back all the way to the psychology of William James in the 1800s and say he theorized this or created this belief system out of necessity to survive. In a very similar way, you have done the same thing.
Mhm. Well, I would say not only survive, but to thrive
Absolutely.
after tragedy. Survival was the first part of it. I had to trust my innate will to survive in order to begin to thrive. I had to wallow in the muck of everything that happened before I could wallow through it. So I think for me, it was survival and then thriving after that. I went through kind of like that process. And again, everybody's different, but that's for me, that's how the process unfolded for me.
Mhm. Yeah, no, you do have to. Survival's the first step when you've gone through something of that gravity. It's only after you've found your feet again that you can start to discern what you can do with this. And that being said, like what have you chosen to do with your healing for your daughter, for yourself, for your family, for your kids and grandkids?
Well, one is to kind of be the best, most compassionate father and grandfather and great grandfather that I could be. I'm a great grandfather now because Janine's daughter's 23 and she's got two kids. So to be the more compassionate, to be um I think mindful of the preciousness of life every day. I don't lose sight of the fact that I'm getting older, and I'm very grateful for every day that I have to do what I do. Um, and just to try to be compassionate, to try to be giving, and to try to, I guess, to mimic, to kind of paraphrase an old Lakota Indian saying, I believe is, to let's, be remembered by the tracks that we leave behind. I want to make sure that I'm leaving behind tracks that hopefully those teachings that are inherent in those tracks will carry on from generation to generation. And that's my hope.
Mhm.
That's my hope. And that's what I try to strive to do every day. Um, and also be grateful for the blessings that I have in my life as opposed to what I don't have in my life. Um, and try to just live every day to the fullest.
I love that.
So earlier I asked you um, if your experience changed the way you teach psychology.
Mhm.
And now I want to flip it and say, has this experience changed the way you perceive God?
Yeah, I believe in God. I'm very non-dogmatic. I don't go to church. I would kind of call myself a guerrilla spiritualist. I take a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of scripture, a little bit of, Native American teachings with animals and nature to form my belief in the world. But I believe in God. I believe for me, God might be the source of all universal energy, but I do believe in God. I do pray to God. I just don't do it in a way that's attached to any dogma. It's part of just the whole interfaith philosophy that I have. So, um, and I do perceive that I probably wouldn't have made it this far in my life if there wasn't some divine intervention or higher power that helped me in addition to the people that on this planet that have supported me. So I kind of believe God exists in everything, nature, the trees, the physical surroundings. So, but yeah, I do believe in God.
So one of the things that the Common Ground podcast is about bringing people from different points of view and showing that we can still find common ground. But at the same point, one of the things when we took a break and we said that we wanted to look and make sure that we were staying true to our core beliefs and our core values was that sometimes we may disagree, but we're going to stand up for what we believe in. And
Mhm.
so I don't want to, I want to be very careful with this because, listen, I am so glad that you were able to find peace and everything else. But at the same time, I feel obligated to speak my truth, and because my truth would disagree with your truth of, you know, I believe that we live in a spiritual realm. I believe that there are angels and there are demons, and they all have access to
Mhm.
our lives and different things. Um, for me, I would be cautious on who we allow to do stuff. Like I said, I'm glad that this has helped you through your grief. I don't want to take away from that at all. But I would, for my viewers, I feel obligated to say that I would be very careful in somebody who will do something the spiritual that doesn't lead to God, that doesn't point you into bringing you closer to God and or doing something. Because I think we are in a spiritual realm. I think there are mediums who have access to both, and the Bible says that you know the that Satan comes as an angel of light. He looks like he can give you good information. He can give you the stuff that you need, but it should all lead. If it's not leading, and I love the question that Sydney asked about testing it, because does it lead you back to a relationship with him? Because to me, like, if that should have been the testing period, if that brought you to him, then maybe God did use that, through. But if it doesn't bring you to a relationship, I want just my viewers to say that, listen, my point of view is different than yours. I'm not trying to condemn you. I'm not trying to, but I feel a need that I need to speak up and say I would
Or
be
ours
cautious of
for that
something.
matter.
Yeah.
And that's another, like, if the it like our listeners, we have listeners that come from all faith perspectives too. A lot of our viewers know our perspective of faith, but even John and I disagree on some of the, just like, have conversation about the principal foundations for. And I appreciate you saying that too, John, because I'm sitting over here thinking the same thing and wanting our viewers to engage with the perspective of this concept of subjective and objective truth. It's something that we've talked about before. It's called cherry picking religion, is a term that's very commonly used for it, not in a negative connotation by any stretch of the imagination, but just this idea that we can take principles from any branch of religion, any arm of that, any denomination of whatever have you, and build our own foundation or temple. Really, what that is, from my perspective personally, is self worship. It means that again, some people don't think that's a bad thing. So I don't even say that in a negative connotation, but it's this idea that I am the governing ruler of my life and what is best for me. That idea that I believe this, I believe this, I believe this, indicates that I am sovereign in my ability to discern what is true or what is not true. And therefore I can create, in a sense, my own religion. People don't call it my own religion, they call it their own belief system. And so, again, none of that being said to discredit what John believes, what our viewers believe, what Dave believes, what I believe. It's just, for me, it really does boil back down to either truth is subjective or objective. That means we can say, I don't like that, so I don't believe in it there because it doesn't feel good. And I'm going to take this from this other thing. And this is my now my belief system. And I'm going to just call that the belief system of Sydney Curtin. Like, my religion is what I have created, kind of thing. And a lot of people do it because there's exposure to so many different belief systems out there.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. When you take a look at spirituality, you can Google spiritual practices. You can come up with a crap load of them. It's a very individualized process. And, for individuals that may consider themselves spiritual but not religious, that gives them, I guess, some variety to co-create their reality in conjunction with the universe. So, but, we can empower ourselves to believe, as to what we believe. And I think there's room for all of it, Sidney. There's room for all of it. I bet you, we could find, no pun intended, but we could find common ground.
Right.
We'll,
Absolutely. And that
yeah,
is the whole point.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Because
Whether,
it's always fascinating
uh,
conversation,
uh,
regardless of the conclusion. Like, I appreciate and have a relationship with you, Dave, because of the commonality and the common ground that we have in the experiences with our
yeah,
daughter. So I
yeah.
have nothing but respect and appreciation for you. When people have been through a grief of that severity, you can't not have respect and appreciation and
Well,
care for somebody.
well, that's it. And I mean, the common ground we could find here is we might have differing beliefs, but we can respect each other's beliefs. And respect is a value that I think can cut across a lot of things, because it's not up to me to tell you how to believe it or question how you believe it. Just understand it, um, and how that aligns. Um, so I think, I mean, this is a good model for just having just straightforward, honest conversations, and, just being able to entertain different perspectives without taking those perspectives personally. And then
Of
just
course.
canceling the other person and saying, well, because you don't believe how I believe, we can't have a conversation, which I always thought was a lot of hogwash anyway. So,
But yeah, no, that's the truth.
No, and I respect you, and dude, I think highly of you, Dave. So like, this isn't anything to put shade on you, you know.
no,
And
John, I never did. Sydney, I never took it like that.
Good.
I never
Good.
took it like that, because it's just a matter of, if you can give me the platform, or anybody the platform, to talk about what they believe, that respect needs to be reciprocated. I need to be able to give, whether I'm a guest on your podcast or you're a guest on mine, I need to give that same platform for your beliefs to be genuinely authentic, and strive to understand it and see where it aligns with what I currently believe. And I think it's establishing yourself as a listener, and making room for all of it.
I have a genuine question about where your faith transitioned, because maybe it was even before um, everything that occurred with your daughter. You said you were raised Catholic,
Yep.
correct?
Yeah, I was.
So,
I was.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was raised Catholic.
What are the core beliefs that you have abandoned from that branch of Christianity, and how did like where's the evolution of what you took versus what you're like, I don't really associate with this part of it?
I think it was basically the dualistic philosophy, kind of the either or beliefs that some versions of the Bible had had. Um, like things that, either heaven or hell. I don't believe there's either. I don't believe in hell myself. Um, I think I don't think that. I mean, to me, it's like, how can a God who could be so forgiving and loving banish us to the exit bowels of hell for the rest of our lives? I always had trouble reconciling that. Um, just some of the beliefs. Um, specifically, I think of homosexuality being a sin. I could never really buy that at all. So it was just kind of like those all or nothing or dualistic things that I walked away from. Um, but as far as the community, the community aspect of, and I was also went to a Maronite Catholic church because I'm Middle Eastern Lebanese by nature.
Okay.
And we had a Maronite Catholic church. I believed in that sense of community, camaraderie, coming together as a faith-based community to help each other out. Those are things that I've taken with me from the religion. Um, there may be, that sometimes I've read a certain scripture verse and I can't think of one off the top of my head that kind of resonated with me. I think there was one, and I forget, that basically talked about the power of presence in the biblical sense. But I looked at this and said, yeah, it's about the power of presence. I can align with that. So just a lot of the dualistic stuff I walked away from. And I think, for me, the other part of that is that I had been raised I've been raised as a Catholic and I had to go to school, Catholic school. Not had to, but I had to go to church as part of my going to a one-room Catholic school. And once I had a choice to do something differently, I just did something differently. My perception was that I had, the religious beliefs kind of shoved down my throat, and that's how I look. I think it as a 16-year-old that I just walked away from that. Um, So that's basically how that all happened. But there are certain beliefs. I do believe in God. And there's certain things that I've taken away from that, but not everything. There's certain things I've divorced myself from, but there's still some aspects of Catholicism and Scripture that I value.
Mm. And we're kind of going into it, going to be rolling into our key takeaways soon. But I have one more question, and I'll turn it to John to see if he's got anything that he wants to end on. Do you feel like your belief system would have evolved to what it is today had you not suffered the loss of your daughter?
No, absolutely not, Sydney.
That's powerful in and of itself,
Very,
even without asking the why.
Yep. It would not have happened. Would I have grown? Yeah, probably, but not to the extent or the leaps and bounds that I feel I have, but no. We wouldn't even be having this conversation today. My daughter hadn't died.
Yeah, actually, that's the same for me too. I would not be on these shows. I wouldn't be with the Common Ground podcast.
life has its own way of taking us to where we need to be.
Mhm.
So, um, so if present day Dave could go back to any point in your life and speak some wisdom to yourself, when would you go back to, and what would you say to yourself?
Wow. At any particular age, huh? Well, I can go back as early as 5 years old, but let's go to the adult self. I think it would be 47. And, I would say to my 47-year-old self, 47-year-old self, you thought life, if you lived the life um, that was going to be seen by God, the universe, however, as being worthy. And if, you treated your wife well, you didn't cheat on her, you're a great father, you would be immune from tragedy and life would treat you fairly. I would tell my 47-year-old self that life isn't fair. It's not always fair. But the quality of our life is determined in terms of how we respond to the challenges that are presented. And I would go back and say that. And I would have eliminated that right from my thought process, from my belief system, because life isn't fair. It
No,
is
it's not.
it's not fair. It's and I think I would go refer to my 47 years old self. I'd say there's this meme I saw on Facebook. It said, "We are given one life. It is neither good or bad. Whether it's good or bad, it's up to us." And that's what I would say to that 47-year-old self.
Before we get into our takeaways, I would love our audience to write down, have you had an experience like Dave's? What's your opinion on the experience? Let's start a cool conversation. I'd love to hear your feedback and what you took from this conversation. We're going to get into the key takeaways, so you could also write down your key takeaways, because we'd love to also hear that. But particularly, have you had an experience like what Dave had? And what's your feelings on that?
Key takeaways.
For me, one of the things you just said, and I think it kind of does, in a sense, deal with this episode. And you said the statement, life isn't fair. I think too much we try to live life like it's supposed to be fair. And it's one of the biggest arguments that I used to have with my ex-wife, was like, that's not fair. I'm like, you need to get over that life is fair. Life is never going to be fair. Life doesn't promise to be fair. You're shooting for something that doesn't exist. If you're here always saying it's not fair, you need a mindset change, because that's not what life promises. Our Constitution doesn't promise this. nothing promises fairness. Life is going to be hard. Life is going to be painful. And there's going to be periods of life that are joyful, that are happy, Um, but it's never going to be fair. Fair is an unrealistic expectation to put on yourself or to put on others. And when you realize that, it helps you go through these painful times even more, because it's not like life is dealing you some thing of rotten lemons. It's we life is hard, and I can't understand, the pain that you went through. I have 3 daughters, and so far I've been blessed that they're with me, and so I don't know what it feels like to lose that. I know what it feels like to be separated from them, but I still have the opportunity and the hope of one day, speaking with them if they're not speaking to me presently. So my heart goes out to you, and regardless of my belief system, I'm glad that your experience has brought you some peace. I also hope that it brings you to Jesus, but I am glad that it brings you peace. I am. I'm truly, grateful for that. So I don't know. Life isn't fair is kind of my takeaway from it.
That's a great way to sum it up. Life is not fair. So after everything beautiful that you just said, you just ended with, life's not fair. Sid, what you got? It's like you just passed the mic, John. Come on, give me something. Goodness gracious. No, it's a loaded topic, and it's heavy. And I think that my key takeaway is not that. As a- Peace doesn't mean that pain disappeared, though.
Yes,
It means that pain doesn't own every room in the house.
that's right.
And the scripture tells us that God will give us peace that surpasses all understanding. And some of the deepest peace that I've felt, and it comes in waves because grief comes in waves, but really it hasn't come from having the answers or knowing that the answers are even coming, but learning to be able to just sit in the mystery without fear.
Yes. That reminds me, if you don't mind me interjecting.
Of course. Well, that was what I was going to tell you.
Yeah.
You were
This reminds me, Sydney, of there's a book by Kent Nerburn called Wisdom in the Stones: Life Lessons of the Native Way. And he was talking to a Lakota elder who said, life isn't a puzzle to be solved. It's a mystery to be honored. And,
Mm.
you look at that and it is a mystery. I mean, some of the things that happened to me, I know happened to me. I because I experienced it. But sometimes we just have to be in awe of the mystery of the universe and the magic of the universe, and just see where it fits in, or just say, yeah, wow, this is pretty cool.
Right.
But this is pretty cool. But yeah, when you said it's a mystery, that brought that takeaway for me, or that quote for me. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. No, I love that quote. I haven't heard it said like that before, but I like that a lot. Well, and that's going to bring me to yours. If our listeners and viewers could take away one thing from this episode, just one gold nugget of wisdom, what would you want that to be for them?
Well, first of all, show grace to yourself, because grief is a marathon. It isn't a sprint. Understand that you did the best that you could under that circumstances. Also, pain demands to be felt. Um, Ride the wave. Don't try to suppress it, because everything has something to teach us. And I know this is kind of like a three-tier takeaway, but you don't have to do this by yourself. Find
Mm.
yourself a good support group, whether it's a good church-based support group, faith-based support group, interfaith support group, whatever is going to give you peace, whatever is going to restore or rebuild your faith, go for it. And as long as it works for you, don't let anybody question the way you choose to believe.
Good tears. I like it.
The final five.
Who is your hero and why?
Wow. That's an easy one. I saw that question. I know this is my mother. And let me tell you why my mother. My mother raised me as an only child. She instilled, the values that I have, as far as how to treat people the way I want to be treated. She instilled my work ethic. But here's the other thing. My mother had tuberculosis when she was 18 years old. Now, she
Mm,
was born in 1914, and back in the day that was 1932, that was a death sentence. They didn't have treatment for tuberculosis.
right.
She fought to live and she beat it. She fought for 6 years and she lived. And I look at it as the greatest gift that my mother gave was she fought to live so I could have my life. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here. Okay. And I wouldn't be here. That thought is, especially as I get older, that thought doesn't escape me. She fought for her life so I could have mine. That's why she's
Mm,
my hero.
That's incredible. Wow. What an awesome woman.
Yeah,
Uh,
you would have liked her, Sydney and John.
yeah.
She didn't take any crap from anybody.
What does
And
that sound like to you,
that's
John? You don't know anybody? No
I
one.
don't know. Anybody.
Nobody comes to mind, actually.
hey, Sydney. I had one conversation with you, and I said this woman isn't going to take any crap from anybody. And
No, 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 she won't.
Uh,
and my mother is like that. I always respected anybody who could just stand in their beliefs, wear their beliefs on their sleeves, and not take any crap from anybody for it. So I
what's her name?
Sadie.
80. Beautiful. I love it. Second question for you is going to be, what is something that grief taught you that you wish you could have learned without your loss?
How to be
Good
more
question.
compassionate, how to be more present for people in my life. That's what I wish that I could have learned without experiencing the grief that I've experienced in my life, Sydney.
It's a really beautiful thing to learn. And it's unfortunate that sometimes it has to take those heavy things for us to come to that gravity of understanding for it.
Wow. What is either one book, one quote, one verse, one song, one concept that guides you, that is, something that has just meant the most to you?
God, John, you're giving me all these choices. I don't know where to start. I got one. Um, it's about forgiveness, and this is going to come from an unlikely source, but one of the greatest. I mean, person who inspired me on my grief was actually a musician. It was Neil Peart, the late great drummer for the rock band Rush. And Peart had his own tragedies in 1997 and 1998. His daughter Selena died in a one-car accident in Toronto. I think it was in 97. And his common-law wife died of stomach cancer after. So the family that he knew was obliterated. He was by himself. So he took a 55,000-mile road trip to find himself. And he had this quote about forgiveness that just blew me away. And I'm going to see if I can recall this per se. There would be no peace for me, no life for me, unless I forgave life for what it had done to me, forgave myself, forgave others for being alive, and eventually forgave myself for being alive. That quote resonated with me. We talk about forgiveness of self and others, but I never thought about forgiving the hand of fate, the hand that fate dealt me. So I learned to forgive what the universe or God, what I thought God bestowed on me, or the universe bestowed on me, however you conceptualize that. But I had to forgive the hand of fate in addition to forgiving myself and others. And that quote has always stayed with me. I quote it. My other favorite one is keep moving, something will come up. That's from Neil Peart too. If you keep
Boy,
moving,
that's the truth.
yeah, keep moving, because when there's darkness, there's light. There's always that yin and yang. And if you keep moving through the darkness, you're going to find a shade of light that you're going to gravitate to. So keep moving, something will come up. Those two have always stayed with me.
If you're going through hell, keep going. You're never going to get out if you just sit there.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you sit in the wilderness, you'll never get out of it.
That's right. That's right.
That's good stuff. Fourth question for you is going to be, what's something just small that you do for yourself that brings you joy, whether it be a good day or a hard day? What's something that consistently brings you joy that you just practice for yourself?
I listen to music. I have a playlist that I will listen to if I'm having a good day. I work out, 4 to 5 days a week just to keep myself in shape. And I tell my students I got to keep myself in shape to keep up with you. So, um, I listen to music. That's always been my go-to. It's provided me peace. A lot of music I listen to provided me a lot of clarity and catharsis for my grief, and it still does. Um, when my mother died, I listened to Sting's "The Soul Cages" over and over and over again, because that was an album that he put together to honor the death of his father. And boy, that was cathartic. So I listen to it for catharsis, for peace, for relaxation, and for clarity.
Yeah. I'm the same way with music. I breathe music. It's on all the time for me, and except for right now, but that's pretty much it. If I'm not mid-conversation, music's playing somewhere.
The final question is, if you could sit down with somebody, living or dead, and have a cup of coffee and a conversation with, who would it be and why?
You can't give me 3 choices, John. I just get one.
No, that's the whole point. Is I love this question.
All right.
It's a good one.
Let me tell you who it would be. I had filtered a lot of choices through my mind, but it would be Maury Schwartz. Maury Schwartz. Remember have you ever heard of the book Tuesdays with Maury by Mitch Albom?
I don't think so.
Okay. Maury Schwartz is a professor at Brandeis University. Was dearly loved by his students. He, in probably 94 or 5, he found out that he had Lou Gehrig's disease. And he was told that he had a year to live. And he went immediately to almost accepting his fate. And he decided to let the world teach the world how to die. So he got Ted Koppel had on Nightline, it had Nightline. He was on Ted Koppel with Nightline, did a series of interviews where he invited people into his dying process. And in the 90s, this was unheard of, where individuals were that open about dying. Mitch Albom was one of his old students at Brandeis. He had heard about the interviews, got together. He recorded Maury Schwartz's views on life, loss, wrote the book Tuesdays with Maury, biggest selling memoir in history. The reason I'd want to sit down with Maury with a cup of coffee is he's the teacher that I always aspire to be. He was loved by his students. He left his students with life lessons. He was a compassionate soul, brilliant man, well-read. And I would just want to just sit down and tell him, because I use Tuesdays with Maurice in my death and dying class, to tell him how much of his teachings have inspired my students, and to tell him what a great teacher and humanitarian I thought he was. So it'd be Maurice Schwartz would be the guy that I would want to have a cup of coffee with.
Well, I'm not one of your students, but just speaking to you, you hit all those attributes. So I think you're way on your way to being exactly who you inspired to be. I'm sure you inspire your students greatly. And
I,
definitely you come across with a ton of compassion. So I believe your students feel that.
Yeah, we need to build a world around compassion and tolerance. We need to come together. When when all else fails, when you're in doubt, love and compassion are usually the tiebreakers.
There you go. Oh, and Dave, for our viewers, you've got your book, which we're going to link all that in the comments. But if our viewers want to find you, connect with you, read your book, how would they go about doing that?
Well, first they could probably go on books on Amazon. It's When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister in Kindle and Kindle and paperback format. My son calls me the world's oldest millennial. I'm all over the place on social media. So you can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Just Google my name. My personal website is davidrobertsmsw.com. Our author website is psychologyprofessorandminister.com. And there's always email as well, too. bootsyandangel@gmail.com is one way to get me. And so, yeah, I'm not too hard to find. And I'll be more than happy to take emails from any of your viewers, take friend requests from any of your viewers, have a conversation with them. I just want to be able to, for as long as I have left, be able to share what I've learned in the hope that it can be of peace and help others in their journey. So
Well, it's a great resource. I hope that our viewers take advantage of that, and we will make sure to link all of those details in the comments below. Please go check out Dave's page.
This has been an awesome conversation. I think we could have gone for a lot longer. This has been a very good one. So thank you for being here.
thank you, John.
Remember, when you take the time to hear someone's story, it gives us the opportunity to find common ground. Dave, thank you again for sharing yours. For Sydney and me, it has been our pleasure to be your host, and you have been listening to the Common Ground Podcast. God bless and good night.
And that's it for today's episode of the Common Ground Podcast. We hope you're leaving with a little more perspective, a little more purpose, and a whole lot more inspiration.
So thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. Thank you to our special guest.
If today's conversation moved you, encouraged you, or challenged you in any way, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, rate it, leave us a review. Your support helps us reach more people who need to find their own common ground.
So for John Fletcher and Sydney Curtin,
we'll see you right here next week, same time, same place on the Common Ground Podcast.